Hey guys, Travis Toy here with Rascal Flats. We're in Atlantic City. We're going to do a rig exploration with my friends from American Musical Supply. So put on your hard hats and your spelunking gear and let's explore. All right, so starting in my signal chain is an MSA XL Signature Series guitar from MSA Pedal Steel Guitars. Beautiful guitars. They're my favorite. You know, I've got fairly standard for you steel players. I have a fairly standard pedal setup. A few extra things that you know, maybe we'll touch on in a little bit. But so moving forward from there, got a Telonix volume pedal from my friends at Telonix. Great volume pedals. But what we're really here to talk about is sort of this area over here and sort of the speaker cab, but run through what I've got going here real fast. I'm using a Boss DD500 for all my delays, and I'm using an Eventide H9 for all my reverbs. And those are actually MIDI together, so I can advance through, because I've got BPMs for specific songs in the set list and that type of thing. And the reverbs are a little different if it's a ballad or an up-tempo, that type of thing. But I can advance through, and they both go through the power of MIDI, which is beautiful. So this is a pretty new pedal for me, but I'm still experimenting a little bit. I had a different overdrive pedal. This is the EVH, MXR EVH 5150 overdrive, and it just gets me like super horsepower for a couple songs that I need really kind of blown out overdrive sounds for. Life is a Highway being a flat song that I'm kind of doing more power chord, slide guitar type of things on here. That's really it. Got a Peterson tuner in there. There's some things up here that are actually for a separate lap steel thing that I'm not using this tour, so we won't even talk about that. Really what I want to talk about is these Tone Block 202 amps, and they are actually part of a signature, I'm the first Artist Series amp with Quilter, and it's the TT12 combo amplifier for pedal steel. The power amp section of that combo is the Tone Block 202. So, you know, for all you steel players out there, this is a 200 watt solid state amplifier, okay? So the thing that I think separates it from, you know, your classic PVs and Evans and all the sort of solid state amps that everybody's been using for a long time is, you know, Pat Quilter has sort of found a great way to bring very tube-like qualities into solid state amps, which is very desired for a lot of guys, me included, because I love a great tube amp. But, you know, the problem with tube amps you run into, you know, is just longevity of tubes, and sometimes, especially for steel, sometimes it could be challenging to get enough clean headroom in a tube amp outside of very controlled environments, you know. So this is really brilliant. You know, the way this works is, you know, you've got a gain and a limiter and a master, and the relationship between those three knobs is super important for all instruments, but especially for steel players, because you can get a high gain, sort of a classic. I would compare it to, you know, a lot of 1960s and even 50s steel guitar recordings were done on Fender Twins and different things. So you can get that little bit of, it's a little bit of an overdriven, like tube-like thing, but it's very controllable, and you can dial it in and out with this limiter knob, okay? So, like I said, 200 watts. It has multiple DI out options. There's an XLR out on the back that is sort of more your classic DI out option. It is affected by speaker load a little bit, and I'm not nearly smart enough to talk about it like Pat Quilter does, but it's cool. The signal out on the front actually has a cab simulator on it. So I'm not using it on this gig, but I have actually already used it on a gig. So the beauty of that is you can run this signal out pre-master, which means that if I wanted to run a line to our audio guys, right, monitor guy or front of house guy, I could, since I'm pre-master on this, when I turn this knob, it doesn't change what he's getting, what your front of house guy is getting. It's only changing what my cabinet is doing. So that sort of turns into a self-monitoring. If I just need more on stage, I can change this, and it doesn't actually change what he's getting, which is brilliant and really, really useful. So, and like I said, it has a cab sim, which sounds incredible. Another major function of this amp, especially for steel players, or that's great for steel players, is there's a voice switch. There's 3 positions. The first position is FR, which stands for full range frequency response. That I almost never use, and I'll tell you why. Because it's actually intended for guys who are going to run a modeling pedal, be it a Kemper or a Helix or anything like that. Something where you're getting your EQs and things before you're getting to your power amp, right? Because it essentially it flattens this thing out and really makes it, you really wind up using it as just sort of a power amp section. So that one, so the first one that will be of interest to steel players is the middle position, which is full Q, which I would compare to, it sounds like a solid state amp to me. It sounds like the best solid state amp I've ever played through. It's missing a little bit of the kind of stereotypical mid-range honkiness that is sort of prevalent in a lot of solid state amps. That will be probably what guys will flip on this amp and go, yeah, that sounds like a really great sounding PV or an Evans or whatever you might have been using, right? Even though I like it a little bit better. The really interesting one on this, and the one that I sort of tend to stay in a lot, is the vintage mode on the voice. So what that does is, it does several things. It kind of fenders up the head a little bit. There's a subtle mid scoop that is like what would be in a Fender tone stack or something, a twin or something like that. It also takes the bass knob and the treble knob and actually makes them passive instead of active. It does not change the mid knob. So the difference between passive and active being that noon is sort of flat, right? And then you are taking from or adding to. In a passive circuit, essentially wide open is the sound of the amp and you're only ever taking away from that, right? And it's a passive circuit. So when you flip into that, it gets, I really like it because it sort of de-solid states it a little bit even more, and it makes the highs sort of that really sweet kind of Fendery type, you know, silky kind of high end. It kind of takes even more of the sort of the mid-range honk that you'll get in a lot of solid state amps out of there. So I really like that. I wind up in that voice a lot because I sort of like that sound. So yeah, so that's the amp. There are multiple speaker outs on the back of this amp, so you can run 2 cabs, 4 ohm and 8 ohm, or any combo of the 2. The power amp sections of these are very smart. They detect, you know, all that stuff and figure out. It's switchable power, so you can use it in the States, 120. You can use it overseas for 220 volts. You don't have to worry about, you know, getting power converters and all those things. So you can use it globally, which is awesome. Yeah, that's it. So we can go from there. We can talk about the cabinet part of this. So like I said, the head component is the Tone Block 202. And I'll unplug this for a second to show you. The coolest part about this is sort of the modular aspect of it. So as you can see on this gig, I need my heads over here so I can access them during the show. You know, if I had a combo, I'd have to get up or have my tech or somebody come back and tweak things. I can separate it so I can do it on my own. But if I leave here and I go play a club tomorrow night or somewhere back in Nashville, I can take that head out and you take this little plate off and it docks in here and it becomes, you know, a combo that's weighs, I don't know, 20 pounds or something. It's not very much. So this block dock cabinet existed. This is not exclusive to my combo, but we did some sort of exclusive features on it. One cool thing we did was add these tilt back legs, which I feel like amps used to all have these, and then at some point none of them did anymore. And I know for me and basically everyone I ever see do a club gig, you go into a club gig and you're standing right in front of or sitting right in front of your amp and you go, God, I didn't hear it. So you find a DI box or an ashtray or something that goes up in the front, you know, and I go, well, why not just put the leg on there, right, and take that out. So we did that, and they were kind enough to like laser etch initials and cool stuff on that. It's got some cool we did a little signature badge on the front that also sets it apart from the standard thing, right? So, and then the big aspect is, it has my signature 12-inch speaker with Eminence speaker company in it. So that is a speaker that I designed along with Eminence. It's a Neo speaker. It weighs 7.2 pounds, I think, or something, maybe 7.3, somewhere in there, in the low 7s. And That was a sort of 9-month project that I did with Eminence to try to make basically to try to make a Neo speaker that I thought could compete or maybe even surpass traditional magnet speaker designs. And a lot of people would argue that that had maybe not ever been done before. So I would argue that. So anyway, so some cool things about this speaker cabinet and the speaker relationship. There's some interesting things with this cabinet. So where you have this wooden deck, which is where the little head sits, I've found that there's some interesting things happening with the way sound is directed in this cabinet. This cabinet, everyone's comments are they can't believe the low end that you get from this cabinet. I also can't believe the low end you get from this cabinet. And it's really interesting. It's sort of, as opposed to a traditional open back design where the open back portion is generally centered on the cabinet, right? And you have the speaker energy sort of going straight out the back. This one's kind of interesting in that this wooden deck here is sort of blocking the top half of the speaker's energy, and I feel like sort of redirecting it out. And there's something that happens with that makes the low end response in this cabinet really incredible. And it remains very tight. Most guitar players, you know, you crank your low end and you sort of hit a threshold where it starts to you lose the definition of it, and it becomes pretty much kind of boomy and not a very desirable low end. It's not tight anymore. I found with this cabinet, it seems like I never really hit that point. I can just keep adding low end and it remains very punchy and really tight and defined, especially hitting large big chord voicings and things. A lot of definition. So that's really cool. That's the cabinet portion of the TT12 combo. So I've had a couple questions asking about, you know, why I went with a 12-inch speaker versus a 15-inch speaker. It's an interesting question. There's a lot of different takes on that. My personal experience with 12s versus 15s. Side note, I also actually have a 15-inch speaker that I designed that I'll circle back to that in a second. So for me, I switched to 12-inch speakers when I started doing a lot of recording, especially on modern country music and you know, contemporary music. I always found that for me, when I sit in front of a 12-inch cabinet versus a 15-inch cabinet, I've always felt like 12-inch speakers are sort of this laser focus coming out of the speaker, right? They tend to be, in my experience, sort of a punchier sound that, for whatever reason, kind of pops through a mix, you know, when you're in the studio or even live, as opposed to when I sit in front of a 15-inch speaker classically, I feel like it's a spread out sound. It kind of comes out that way, and you don't have as much of the sort of center beam of sound, if you will. So that's why I tend to like 12. So I designed a 15-inch speaker. When I designed the 12, there's a lot of guys in the steel community that very much like 15-inch speakers, so everybody kind of asked me to do a 15. So part of the thing I tried to achieve in my 15-inch speaker was I wanted to try to get the things that I like about both speakers, because I do like the sort of wideness that you get with a 15-inch speaker, but for me it's missing the sort of that laser beam like pointed thing that happens in a 12. So in the 15 I tried to design a little bit of that in there, and I think we did. So for me, my 15 sort of, you get some of that punch down the middle, but it also still sounds sort of wider sounding. And I don't know, you know, in real world, I don't know how much of that translates over a mic. It certainly translates in a club situation, or if you're just standing back from a speaker cabinet, you know, and sort of hearing it in person, you can kind of hear the difference. So my thoughts on 12 versus 15. Check out my signature quilter combo on AmericanMusical.com.